We know that Democrats cheat, and we know they do their voting between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m.
With the doors closed.
With the doors closed, and they're the kind of people that have to win at all cost, and they will escalate one above you, no matter what it is that you're doing. They will escalate one beyond you, and so Democrats are about the acquisition and maintaining of power. That's it. And their utter disregard, as you've said, and many others I've said, they're a death cult. I had said when we were discussing that the only thing really left, their ultimate goal, is cannibalism. And that's because they're not satisfied with you eating bugs. They want you to eat each other.
Welcome to another episode of WTF, which everyone in the world who's sane and normal and who doesn't have a potty mouth knows means the world according to Taunton and Fox. It doesn't mean what you might think it means. Anyway, here we are on the last full day in Alabama. Yesterday I watched something they call football here. Very confused as to why it's called football. Not a lot of feet involved. Actually, there was quite a lot of feet involved yesterday. There was a lot of punting and stuff. It showed me that I learned something about American football yesterday. It was invented by a
professor at Harvard, I believe, to illustrate military tactics.
It's got a lot of rules, so it was quite interesting. And behind us, which you can't see, there may or may not have been an accident with the boat, of which I had nothing to do with. But the reason why I wanted to do this,
Michael, he's not your friend.
Shush now, Michael. It wasn't your fault. That I think you got to litigate against these people. Anyway, we were watching with increasing joy today as Donald serves up his McDonald's to people. Donald McDonald, which is great. And but as we were talking away the other night about how dreadful Kamala is and to what extent the left will go to, I wanted to have a sort of apocalypto episode of WTF to talk to Larry about something he said to me. He went, "It'll be cannibalism next." And I was like, what? So, Larry, would you like to elucidate on this?
I think we first need to address that.
Oh, yes, we do. We do. Do you address that?
Well, we have the American flag in the background, and I tweeted that the only thing that was missing to complement it would be a Union Jack. And then I remembered that you had brought for me one of these lovely pins, lapel pins, which are terrific, which you can buy for £10 at...
I think it's the culturestores.co.uk, I think. And follow us at culture_stores on Twitter. And it's because the British, obviously, we don't like violent revolutions, more's the pity, at the moment. So it's our way of doing a gentle middle finger to the woke brigade and the miserable death cult that is socialism. So yeah, do wear one so you can wear it on the tube and someone can look at you and go, "What, you don't like mutilating children?"
I thought that was interesting because you were wearing one when you arrived, and I thought it looked, quite nice. I thought it was something you probably picked up at a souvenir store, at Trafalgar Square, or something. And for you to tell me that this is deemed to be some kind of middle finger to the woke crowd, really quite surprised me, because we wouldn't think of something like that as being offensive to anyone if you had this with an American flag on it. But it's an indicator of just how far gone Britain really is, that wearing the flag, and we're getting there. We're not there yet. I guess we are in some places, but the part of the country where I live, almost everybody flies the American flag. You've probably noticed that. A trailer will have the American flag. The place where we went shooting, they have multiple American flags. Flag poles, actually. But I like these. These are quite nice. And tell us again where you can get them.
You get them at theculturestores.com. It is interesting, though, the flag, before we get on to cannibalism. The flag is, Roger Scruton used to say it, the English conservative, last permitted English conservative thinker who was mainstream and very bright. He used to talk about somewhere people and anywhere people. And the flag puts you somewhere. And it's amazing in America. I find it comforting every time I see a flag because I feel that these people are American. Whereas in England, if you see a sort of I don't know, an LGBTQ plus IS whatever flag, I don't know whether I'm going to bump into a bunch of gay people, or I'm going to bump into a bunch of child mutilation people, or a bunch of abortion people, or a bunch of Black Lives Matter people. I don't know what flag they are, what their flag represents. It's a social construct, I suppose. So, anyway, you can get them. But I went to, my view on the whole Commoner car crash, where you posted this thing of internal Democrat polling saying that she has never been ahead in the swing states at all. And my question was, what are they going to do next to try and rectify this problem, because they don't want to give up power? And you started getting towards cannibalism. So can you talk me through cannibalism?
As I recall, it's a slightly different context than that. I think there are two separate things going on here. One is that I was simply indicating that, I mean, listen, if this were an election that were one day in person voting by U.S. citizens only with proof of identification, it would be a landslide. It would be, as we've said this before, I think it would be almost Reagan-esque, 1984 Reagan of Vermondale taking every state but Minnesota. But we know that Democrats cheat, and we know they do their voting between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m.
With the doors closed.
With the doors closed and windows boarded up and all of that. We know that they don't want anyone watching what they're doing. We know that they want illegals. I mean, they've been very open about this. They want illegals voting. So with that in mind, I was just simply saying that Democrats they're that person that we've all known at some point in our life, that whatever you're doing, if you're just playing a game, they're the kind of people that have to win at all cost, and they will escalate one above you, no matter what it is that you're doing. They will escalate one beyond you. And so they're that kid in the neighborhood that if you get into a fight when you were kids, that there are unwritten rules about what you do and you don't do. They're the kind of kids who will, pick up a board with nails in it, or pull out a knife or a broken bottle, where others would go, whoa, that's not the way we do things in our neighborhood. All those kind of kids grew up to become Democrats. They all did. And this is the kind of stuff that they do in their elections, because Democrats are about the acquisition and maintaining of power. That's it. That's the only thing that they're about. And they don't respect the rule of law. They don't respect the Constitution. So they're willing to do anything. Now, as for cannibalism, what I was talking about there was something slightly different, and that is that on the moral side, not that voting doesn't involve a moral component, but on the moral side, when we're looking at the kind of things that they're doing to children, for instance, and the fact they don't want you eating meat, and the World Economic Forum pushing bugs, and we have Bill Gates pushing these kinds of things with his Beyond Meat, wherever the hell that is. Those kinds of things. And their utter disregard, as you've said, and many others I've said, they're a death cult. So they want to see people committing suicide, and they're about the annihilation of the unborn, the mutilation of children, on and on and on and on. I had said when we were discussing that the only thing really left, their ultimate goal, is cannibalism. And that's because they're not satisfied with you eating bugs. They want you to eat each other. They want you to eat each other. And I believe that's coming. We've already seen those ideas being floated in places like the New Yorker and the New York Times and elsewhere, suggesting, hey, maybe we need to get over our squeamishness about this. I mean, it is meat. I mean, maybe we need to get beyond. But see, once you've killed conscience and you've killed the idea of God, that there is an ultimate right and wrong, then it's anything goes. It says Dostoevsky said, if there is no immortality, there could be no virtue, and all things are permissible, right up to eating each other. And I really think we're going to see that. I think that's coming.
So if there is no immortality, there is no virtue. So the immortality that Dostoevsky is talking about is the promise of eternal life.
That's right.
Right.
To paraphrase it, it might be, if there is no God, then there's no ultimate right and wrong, and you can do anything you can get away with.
Which is the whole reason for it anyway, because there's no reason. We've seen Kamala, I'm so love the fact that I'm getting that right, by the way, every time. So she can't call me a racist. I'd also, at this juncture, quickly before I get my thought out, like to say I'm not that sorry for wearing glasses, and I'm not sorry for smoking a cigar.
Yeah, I wore sunglasses last time, and there are a few people who came into the comments who were critical of that. We were sitting at that time on the porch back here at about this time of day where the sun is going down over there, and it was so bright, and these lights are quite bright. So, yes, I don't mind you wearing the sunglasses, but no doubt someone will come into the comments and say you're a horrible person for doing it.
So we've had Kamala's rally where someone goes, Jesus is king or Christ is Lord, or one of the, whichever way round it is, Christ is king, I think they say. And then she went, you're at the wrong rally. And then we've then seen her tweet today that, it's about the faithful. And
yes.
It's kind of crazy. I mean, do you think that, okay, I know that I think we've touched on this before, but the idea that Trump is not completely on board with the foundational Christian view that every single human life is sacred, therefore you can't take that. Do you think Christians will lend their vote to Kamala, or do you think they will not vote at all?
No real Christian will vote for Kamala Harris unless they're just very, very ignorant and just really have no idea what she represents, what she stands for. And that doesn't mean that they have to be pro-Trump necessarily, but it means that they would have enough sense to recognize. The tweet you're referring to, today is Sunday. To date this just a little bit for when it airs. Today is a Sunday, and she tweeted it today. And the tweet shows her what she appears to be in a pulpit of a church somewhere. You can see the cross behind her on vestments or a communion table or something. I'm just going from memory, but you see multiple Christian crosses behind her, and then it says people of faith, get behind Kamala Harris and vote for her, and it's portraying her like she's a very Christian woman. And to me, that's blasphemous. There are things that you can do that are that are wrong, but they're not blasphemous. But that's blasphemous. That's the kind of stuff where that when people do it, I feel the need to back away from them slightly, because I don't want to be nearby when they're hit by lightning. It's an affront to God, because we're talking about an individual who is, just as we were talking about before, all that she stands for is demonic. I mean, she's in favor of the annihilation of the unborn. And I don't mean just like in instances of rape or something like that, which in my opinion would be bad enough, but we're talking about wholesale slaughter. They want you to kill your baby. That's what they're about. They want you to kill your child. And then the mutilation of children, open borders, which I think is evil. I've been saying to you as we've been driving around, and we've encountered people who genuinely live in real poverty, and they're the kind of people that the Biden administration, a would-be Harris administration, Democrats in general, not only did they not care about them, they've made them enemies. They hate them, and their whole agenda is anti-human, and that's demonic. So to go and then pretend that you are somehow representing God and that to vote for her is a vote for Jesus, I find that so offensive. Years ago, in a completely different level, but in the state of Alabama, one of our governors, who I believe is a Christian, but he wanted to increase taxes. You may remember this. He wanted to increase taxes for education. And his campaign, which I found very offensive, was that they had signage all over that said Jesus would vote yes. And I thought, hold on. Do you remember that? I remember thinking, now hold on just a second. I don't think that's a true statement, first of all. But second of all, you're co-opting faith, and you're trying to guilt Christians into saying that if they were their conscience were to say, hey, I should vote no to this, that they are somehow doing something contrary to the will of God. If you're going to make that kind of statement, you better be right about it.
But I mean, can't you say exactly the same thing about conservatives, which is that they have this view of saying WWJD, what would Jesus do? They have the little...
Well, I just basically said it. You just asked me, would a Christian vote for? I just basically said Jesus would not vote for Kamala Harris. But I think I have firm grounds to say there's no gray area here. When we have Jesus saying, anyone who hurts one of these little ones, it would be better that a millstone be put around his neck. Jesus was quite clear on how he felt about children. So it's with absolute clarity and assurance that I can say that. But to come along and say, and I'm using the governor's example, not Kamala Harris, he wasn't promoting something that was evil. It was something that was kind of a gray area. But to say with absolute assurance that to vote against it was to do something contrary to the will of God in an area like that.
That is blasphemous, because
Yes,
it's taking
it's
the
wrong.
Lord's name in vain in a slightly different way.
Yes.
It's taking the
Yeah, I
Lord's
like
intention.
that. That's a good way of putting it.
It's taking the Lord's intention in vain,
Yes.
which is even worse.
I think
But then hang on, because I wanted to talk about this as well. And I know you don't really want to talk about it, but
probably don't.
I do want to talk about
I probably don't.
because I've sort of been having this long conversation in my own head about the atomic bomb.
You're always having conversations in your head.
I know it's a problem, and I'll see someone for it at some point. But I've been having this conversation with myself about the atomic bomb. So when we start to have these conversations about how, what depths of depravity will those that seek power for power's sake, and as Dostoevsky said, don't.
Ranger just sees a Democrat.
Ranger, that squirrel voted Republican. It's a MAGA squirrel, Ranger.
Come here, bud. Come on, bud. Keep going.
We imagine these terrible things that will be done by the Democrats to hold on to power. And then I keep thinking about the atomic bomb and the fact that the atomic bomb was dropped on a country. And I want to know, just as a British person, and I don't have a judgment on this, by the way, I just want to hear it. As a British person, we never dropped an atomic bomb on anyone. What do Americans feel in 2024? And would it split the political divide? What would they feel as they look back in history on the use of the atomic bomb twice in Japan?
Well, before I come to that, let me say something else on what we were just talking about that might be helpful for people as we're discussing this, because I just want to put a bow on that previous subject and how God may or may not be used politically or references to God. There's a passage in Job that I take very, very seriously, and it's one that sticks in the back of my head, and it's where Job's friends, going throughout the book, God has said nothing. And going throughout the book, they're all trying to explain to him why he's suffering. He's lost his family and his home, he's lost everything. And they're all offering him their own theological explanations for this.
But for people who watch me and my stuff, just tell them what happens to Job, quick.
Okay.
Just explain. Could you just give a little...
Job is a righteous man.
It's a book in the Bible.
It's a book in the Bible. Job is a righteous man, and the devil says to God, I can make him turn on you. And I can do it by taking everything he has, basically. I'm paraphrasing all this.
Yeah.
And God says, have at it. And so the devil does. Satan attempts to destroy Job's faith in God, and Job's faith never wavers in God. But his friends are all saying to him, well, this has happened to you for this reason and that reason, or God has abandoned you, curse him and die, and all this kind of stuff that they're saying. And then God, who is silent throughout the book, finally speaks. And when he does, he says, my anger burns against your friends, for they have not spoken rightly of me. It's kind of a terrifying line.
Wow.
He says, they have not spoken rightly of me. And I think we too casually, when Scripture says don't take the Lord's name in vain, it's a warning. It's saying, there are a lot of things that you could say, WTF, some might think is crude, but it's not a
It
blasphemy.
means the world according to Taunton and Fox.
Yes,
What's your problem?
it's not a blasphemy, and it's not taking the Lord's name in vain, which is expressly forbidden. But also just making casual references to his name or referring to him and his character in a way that isn't accurate is to fall afoul of God, is to court wrath. And therefore, when I see Kamala Harris doing what she's doing, or others doing what they're doing, it could be a Republican as well, I find that unsettling. I think you need to be careful here, because he's not a cosmic Santa Claus. He will judge. But as for your question about the atomic bomb, when I was teaching...
hang on a minute before we get there. So, sorry.
I knew you'd have something to say on that.
Both sides guilty of this?
Yes,
Yeah.
both sides can be guilty of this. And I'd have to think about it where Trump is concerned. I don't recall Trump doing something like that. Maybe he has. There might be somebody.
He's certainly claimed that
He has certainly courted evangelicals,
his
but I haven't.
His head to the right was an act of God.
That was actually to the left. But I think that I don't recall him saying God said.
He said it. No, he didn't say God said. But he were at the dinner, at the Catholic dinner in New York. He very heavily said that turn of his head. Well, actually, he was clever. Right. All right, fine, but it doesn't change the problem, which is that is he not saying God is on my side?
Well, again, I'll just simply say I don't know what he said or didn't say. I'll simply say this: that the principle applies. The principle applies across the board to everyone, and you have to be very, very careful in that regard. I become nervous, as I just told you. A Republican governor of this state, who I liked and for whom I voted, said Jesus would vote yes. And I was thinking, no, you can't say that. Don't go around saying something like that on an issue like this, because this is not an issue where it's so cut and dried, where it's quite so clear. And to me, that was not appropriate. But when we're talking about the atomic bomb, you'll find this very interesting. Now, this is 25 years ago when I was teaching university, and then later when I was teaching in a preparatory school, to demonstrate on the first day of class to students that history isn't just a memorization of names and dates and places, that it requires judicious handling of facts. It's often said facts speak for themselves. Well, no, facts don't speak for themselves. It requires a judicious processing of the facts and laying them out and understanding how to arrange them in a way that tells a truthful story. Facts can be arranged to tell a false story. So I would give them, on the first day of class, I would give all of these students a survey that they were to complete. And the way the survey, they were to interview 3 people for each question, one who was under 25, one between 25 and 50, and one 50 and up. Now, this is in the 90s, okay? So there were a lot of World War II veterans around, a lot of people who had lived through the Second World War and certainly Korea and Vietnam. So I put all these controversial questions on there concerning the assassination of JFK. Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. The CIA did it. I would put these various options. The American Civil War was caused by states' rights, slavery, and on and on. But then one of the questions that I had on there was concerning the dropping of the atomic bombs. A, one should have been dropped. B, both should have been dropped. C, neither should have been dropped. There should have been a conventional landing. And maybe I had a D on there, as you would suggest, an encirclement, a blockade of Japan and starving out the island. What was fascinating, Laurence, was that the 50 and up crowd was drop them both. Overwhelmingly drop them both. The younger you got, the fewer the bombs. So the 25 and 50 crowd, they were kind of evenly split. Most said that at least one bomb should have been dropped. But the really self-righteous ones were the 25 and below, and they said neither should have been dropped because they were feeling very moral. And I would never do anything as horrible as that. But the older crowd would say, you didn't lose a brother at Okinawa. You don't know what it was like to fight at Tarawa. You don't know what it was like on the Iwo Jima. Drop both of those things. And they had a very different perspective. It reminds me of a scene from, did you ever see Aliens? The one with the S with Bill Paxton in it.
The second one where they go on those funny, where they go to the station.
They go to they go there. And Bill Paxton is this, plays this really tough Marine, and he's pretty sure that they'll be able to. Sorry, my phone wasn't muted. They'll be able to, take these creatures on, and then you have the scene where they're running back to the spaceship, and they're trying to close the doors of one of these creatures. And his mouth is coming out and snapping. And when the doors close, Bill Paxton is, and he says, "Let's just nuke them from space." Yeah. It's a great line. But the reality is, it's easy to sit back and be very pompous morally and say what you wouldn't do when you aren't in those circumstances. So concerning the dropping of the atomic bombs, I know too much. I know too many of the principals who were involved. I knew the man who, an Oxford historian, very famous Oxford historian, M.R.D. Foote, Michael Richard Daniel Foote, who was a mentor to me. He was the man who provided the estimates to George Marshall on what a conventional landing would cost. He estimated between 1 million and 1.5 million U.S. casualties alone, to say nothing of the Japanese casualties, which were estimated to be infinitely higher. I mean, the Japanese were training their, the men, women, children to meet the invaders on the beaches with pitchforks. I mean, this was the kind of mentality. And they were a feudalistic, emperor-worshipping cult that believed that this is what they must do for the sake of their emperor and to have any hope of, of honor, of some kind of life in the hereafter. And that mentality, they had seen it all too clearly in the island hopping campaign and places like Okinawa and Iwo Jima. Some of the images at Okinawa, I've been to Okinawa, I've been to Heartbreak Ridge. And Hacksaw Ridge, not Heartbreak Ridge. Hacksaw Ridge. I've been there, and going through those tunnels, and you see the chips in the concrete where they held grenades to themselves and committed suicide, bonsai attacks, where they came out knowing they were going to get mowed down by machine guns. The cliffs where Okinawan women, with American translators saying to them, "Please don't do this." So they were throwing their children off of the cliffs. They had been told that the Americans were going to eat them and rape them and do horrible things to them. And so you have Americans speaking to them with loudspeakers saying, "We won't harm you. We won't harm you." And you see these women. It's horrible. You see them taking their babies and throwing them off the cliffs, and then they themselves jumping off afterwards. It didn't take long for American planners to realize if they will do this on a godforsaken rock like Iwo Jima, you better believe for the home island, they will die by the hundreds of thousands or millions. And it was estimated to be well into the millions. And so the dropping of the atomic bombs, Stephen Ambrose, the late Stephen Ambrose, one of the great historians, he's argued that it was actually a moral act, because he said it gave the Japanese high command the excuse
to surrender,
to save face, because they said, we can't fight wonder weapons.
So my interest in it is actually, which ties into what you're saying, which is the over 50s in the 90s who would have had veteran, known veterans, known people who'd suffered the horrors of war. It was a fairly unequivocal decision. It was the right thing to do, and you've just given a case for why it would be the case. We are now living in a very different age, which has dominated the cultural dialogue, the political dialogue. A lot of all of these dialogues are dominated by what I would call influencers, young people with big followings who have that thing. I remember at 13 being much more morally unambiguous than I am now. And I'm interested to know that as these sort of smatterings of talks emerge again amongst young people about what we can and what can be done to people that you don't agree with, put aside war. Trump is, the New York Times has had Trump as being like Hitler, Mussolini, and all this and that. They're still doing it.
This is just crazy, isn't it?
Despite the fact that they've just tried to kill another human being who is an actual representative of democracy. What are the moral lessons that can be passed down through to younger people to know that they're sort of over-moralizing of things, which is totally understandable. We all do it when we're young. But also this talk of nuclear weapons again is happening. And I'm then trying to link that back to going, if these people are as rabid death cultist bastards that I know they are, I think they are, I've encountered them, at what length would they stop? Because I suddenly start thinking about nuclear war. Would they annihilate the world just to not lose power? Just to declare martial law? Would a nuclear explosion go off in a civilian area that wasn't huge or massive just to switch the whole conversation away from the election? How far would people go? What you say cannibalism is the next taboo that's going to be ripped out. Yeah. I'm like, what if there's something more conventional that can be done? And I feel like this is a happy, warm moment before Trump wins. But another part of me is going, they're going to have to pull out all the stops.
Well, I think both of us believe that, and we'd love to be wrong, by the way. You're free to dunk on me with memes or whatever if it turns out that I am wrong and that there is a peaceful transference of power, because Trump will win. It's just a question of whether they actually say that he won. And I do make a distinction. I always try to make a distinction between Trump winning and actually taking office. I think they're prepared to burn the whole country to the ground before they allow for a peaceful transference of power. Now, you've probably seen this quotation. It's a meme that goes all over, and it's a loose quotation. You might remember it. Maybe you do, because I don't have it exactly, but it's attributed to Sun Tzu of The Art of War, that says an evil man or something will burn his own kingdom to ashes before he lets. I don't remember exactly the way it goes, but it's essentially speaking of spite. And Sun Tzu never said it, by the way, but it's one of those things somebody came up with and realized no one is going to quote this because they don't know who I am. So I'll attribute it to Sun Tzu. I've decided that I could put any kind of tweet that would go viral if I just said Charles Spurgeon said it.
Yeah.
People will go, well, Charles Spurgeon said it. Retweet.
Only on Christian Twitter.
Only on Christian Twitter.
Something go viral with the OnlyFans crowd.
But I agree with you that they're prepared to do anything. I mean, you think that. I think that. Do I think they would stop short of starting a nuclear war with Russia? No. Will they? I don't know. But do I think that they're capable of that? The answer is yes, because I think, it's interesting. I've been reading you would find it very interesting. I've been reading a history called The Collapse of the Third Republic. It's about it begins in 1871 and it goes through to May 10 of 1940, which that the Third Republic was the government when in France when Hitler invaded in May 1940. And it's written by William Shire. It was published in, I think, 68, 69. He's long since been dead. But Shire's he was a real journalist, and he was on the ground in Berlin and in France when these things were going on. And he said he began asking himself, how did the Third Republic, one of the largest armies in the world, how did the Third Republic, that government, collapse? Took 46 days for Hitler to overrun France. And he said, I began asking myself the question, how did this happen? And he says, and that's the result of that research is this book. And the parallels, again, written 50 plus years ago, the parallels between then and now are fascinating. And one of the chief parallels, my takeaway, is that he says that the radicals in France, their hatred for their political opponents was greater than their hatred of Hitler and the Nazis.
Hence
the reason collaboration was so widespread. What are you going to say?
But is that true of Democrat America?
I think so. I think that their hatred of I think their hatred of conservatives, and by that I mean authentic conservatives, red state America, which they know to have its roots in Christianity. Their hatred of that is so great that they're willing to open their borders and destroy their own towns. They're willing to destroy their own cities because they want to spite those people that much. They are willing to trash their own cities, to destroy their own country. They are willing to destroy the Constitution that serves to protect them as well, and the rule of law, because they're that full of hate for their political opponents. And it's interesting because Shire's argument, in part, is that France fell very quickly because, to use the quotation often attributed to Lincoln, a house divided against itself, can't stand. And it's a biblical reference. That's where I think America is. I think we're at that place that the infighting and the hatred is so deep and so real, they will burn their own kingdom to ashes. And they are in the process of doing it. And that's what we're hoping that, someone like Trump, or a Vance or a DeSantis or whoever at some point can reverse that. But they're destroying the economy. It's a willful destruction. When you tell people they have to be locked down in their homes, and the economists are all telling you, you could do this for a few days maybe, but this will destroy the economy. You can't do this. And you do it anyway when you know that it's all, no pun intended, trumped up nonsense. You're full of a hate that's so deep that it goes beyond rational explanation.
And is our moral duty to hate in return?
No, I think that it's our moral duty to hate what they're doing and to stop it. But no, I don't think we're more Democrats.
Ranger.
Democrat. He hates Democrats.
He doesn't. Ranger. I wouldn't like to bump into Ranger on a bad day. Is there a?
What do you say? Do you think we're supposed to hate them?
I really struggle with it because I.
It's hard not to.
The only way I can hold on to it is I apply my Islam test, which is that I don't hate Muslims, I hate Islam. So I go...
See, that's Jay Smith. Jay would say he hates Islam. Jay Smith, my good friend who debated Muslims for 25 years in London and continues to do it all over the world. You'll find him on my channel, Ideas Have Consequences, Larry Alex Taunton. You'll find my interview with Jay and what he has to say, amazing guy. But Jay, he's got a big scar right here where some Muslims, after a debate at Hyde Park, they followed him down to the tube station, tried to cut his throat.
Yeah.
Jay says, I love Muslims. He says, I want them to come back. I want them to come to Jesus. I want them to come and know Jesus. He says, but I hate the religion. I hate what it is. But you apply your Islam test. Explain the Islam test.
So, my Islam test is that the ideology is very similar to me to leftism. So it wants the same thing, which is a supremacy over you, your complete subservience to it.
Have you seen the two Muslim guys kissing?
Oh, the guy that got his head blown off.
Yeah, he got his head blown off, and it's the two of them. It's not
AI. I just want to take a moment to say the Guardian newspaper in England for saying that he was a warrior's death. A guy that has walked through tunnels, more extensive range of tunnels than the London Underground, with his wife with a £32,000 Hermes bag, fleeing the very people that he has made so ignorant that they will have to die knowing nothing.
And having engineered rape.
But then you see my rage
multiple rapes.
No, I'm like, good for you, bullet in the head. And I'm like, well, at what point do I become them, and at what point do they become us?
Well, see, I it's a good question because you don't want to become the very thing that you're fighting against. It's the theme of movies. You're an actor. You've seen this many times where don't. the guy's going to,
Yeah.
"Don't, you're better than that." That's that scene. How many times is that
Every
been in a
time.
movie? Don't do it. And I'm sitting there going, "No, do it.
Yeah.
Do it. Go ahead and do it." But I think we both agree that you don't want to become your enemy. It's the horror of an Abu Ghraib, of these black sites where guys were taken off and waterboarded and all this kind of stuff. I mean, you're just adding fuel to the fire.
I'm okay with
waterboarding.
No, I'm genuinely okay with waterboarding.
Well, see, I'm okay with atomic bombs if they're used appropriately. And Hiroshima and Nagasaki was absolutely justified, 100% justified.
Okay, so then, okay. Tell me if this is true.
Okay.
So I was told, I think I've read, because I love history and I've read, that there was such a huge amount of complaining from the military during Vietnam, either in Vietnam or Korea, that look at all these horrible atrocities that are being committed, that the military just went, well, let's stick some camera people up here so they can see what's going on too.
Yeah.
And then what happened was, instead of big, set-piece military exercises, which did involve the massacre and the murder of a lot of people, innocent civilians, or civilians of the nation that declared war and you didn't stop them or overthrew the government, that we now have a different kind of warfare.
The living room war, as it was called.
Israel putting in little C4 charges into pages to try and really overly focus on the minimalization, which I think we would all say was a good thing in modern war, of what is, you're always going to have collateral damage. And I think this problem of possibly of woke left people, they're like, well, if you're going to have a war, no innocent people can die, which means that you can't have a war at all. Whereas I suppose the mindset of a young person who is less idealistic would be some innocent people are going to die in that situation. Do you understand what I'm trying?
I know exactly
what I'm trying to get at. So have we got to a point whereby, because there haven't been a lot of people killed, that we haven't seen a lot of, it moves people when 13 American soldiers who didn't need to die after that disastrous evacuation from Kabul were brought off the plane. That's 13. Do you fall into the Stalin thing that one death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Are young people unable to process even the idea of people dying to the point where they go, well, we just want to kill a lot of people and see what happens?
Well, I think this is a very nuanced issue. Listen, as you know, I'm a child of the military, and I was born on an Army base and was raised on them. And so I come from a very different ethic maybe than what is currently fashionable. The American soldiers that I would know, and many of the British soldiers that I've met, I don't think any of them are desirous of killing innocents. Quite the opposite. However, unfortunately, no bullet has yet been invented or bomb that only kills guilty people. Yeah. And the nature of war is that innocents do die. Now, it's one thing to target them, to deliberately go after them,
or
but you have to define
human shields.
I'm sorry?
Or use them as human shields.
Or use them as human shields. Read Black Hawk Down. I mean, They're talking about using children as human shields for snipers. They just stack children all over a sniper, knowing they were weaponizing the morality of the Rangers against them, knowing that they weren't going to, shoot back and shoot all these kids. They began using flash grenades, concussion grenades to get these kids, off so they could target the shooter. But the reality is that innocents are killed, and the very definition of innocent has to be, defined, because what do we mean by innocents? Are people who are working in bomb factories, are they innocent? Are people who are aiding and abetting the enemy, are they innocents? And these are the kinds of questions that are ultimately sort of, bandied about. We're talking about something like what you've raised on the porch when we're enjoying a cigar in the evening, Dresden, or something like that. What does that look like? And typically, you know, if we're seeing what's happening with Hamas, for instance, we know that Hamas, I mean, you're just talking about the tunnel system. We know that they've embedded themselves, you know, among civilians. And that is an effort, again, to weaponize your morality. I'm going to use your morality against you. I'm going to assume that you won't blow me up here because I am among the people. We know that they were using a hospital, for instance, to hide, you know, in the basement or to fire rockets from and things like that, because it's a propaganda victory if you blow it up.
So the one thing, whatever.
I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah,
it's not so easy to navigate all that.
To define innocence, certainly.
Yes.
But in the Middle East thing, which I do think is linked to, again, I mean, I was listening to something, anyway, I won't go there. The idea that...
wherever it was, I wish you'd have gone there.
My first political understanding that differentiated the West from the enemies of the West was that I remember American president, it would have been Reagan, actually, I'm sure it would have been Reagan, saying we do not negotiate with terrorists.
Yeah.
So then
Margaret Thatcher too, I think.
And then, Margaret Thatcher, we had the Iranian embassy in London. But
well, her response to the Falkland Islands crisis was
exactly
iron-fisted.
But I thought to myself, okay, I know that because I know what terrorism is. I can explain it to myself, which is terrorism is the deliberate targeting of genuinely innocent people.
Yeah.
So to create a very, very strong reaction. So that's what terrorism is, and I find it actually repellent in a really sad way that it's Netanyahu who's teaching my kids that lesson instead of Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. Whereas my kids are being taught...
I have a lot of respect for Netanyahu.
I do. My kids
I'm pro-Israel, by the way.
Can you tell? My kids are being taught at school. Like, I will get in a car with one of my children and they will say, they will only talk about Palestine.
Yeah.
And I will sit there and go... I just ask them a few questions. Like, so who started it? Simple questions like that. And then I say, where is Palestine? Do you know where Palestine is? And do you know what it was called before? It was called Palestine. And then I tell them just little things. And then they go back in school and tell the teachers, and the teachers shit on them from a great height. So what I'm trying to say is, this in my brain, maybe I'm just way too paranoid, but, pulling it back from the nuclear weapon thing, but why wouldn't the Democrats organise a mass shooting in an all-black school by a white supremacist?
Well, I think that, some would say that they did or have. There's a lot of questions surrounding, the Las Vegas, massacre. What happened there? Why don't we know what really happened there? I mean, even the attempt on Trump's life, multiple attempts now, what was going on with that? Why don't we know more about that? Why has that story been buried? Now, I'm not saying that Democrats were behind either of those, but I will say that they were behind the attempt on Trump's life to this extent. At the very least, they created an atmosphere of hate,
which they're still doing.
Yes, which they're still doing, and you've experienced this to some extent, at a much lower level. But you're well known in Britain, and the media has portrayed you as a racist and bigot and an awful human being, and you're whatever it is they
by
say
the way,
about
the
you.
media. I know I'm doing something right.
But why they do that, of course, is because they want you to be abused by British people when you get on the tube or when you're eating in a restaurant. They're wanting to create that atmosphere. They want there to be no safe space for you. And they're encouraging people, they're signaling them that any abuse to you will go unpunished. There's kind of a wink and a nod sort of thing.
Oh, we didn't see that. Oh, did he?
He's
dead.
Exactly.
We abhor violence. We hate it.
We don't want that to happen. And that was a conversation I was having with you earlier when I offered a bit of advice. But I think with Trump, it's to the 10th power when you're seeing the front of the nation. I think that magazine, which is so leftist, they have a picture of Trump with the little Hitler mustache. And then you have an idiot like David Frum.
To a young ideologue who thinks that Hitler was bad, but they know nothing about what Hitler did.
Yeah.
The word Hitler is terrible, and it's associated with genocide, even though ironically it's associated with the genocide of the people that they're kind of habit genociding.
Yes.
That it would feel, it's almost compelling people as a moral duty
That you have to kill him.
to go and kill him.
Oh, we have
And
members of government saying that.
So-
I'm going to take Trump out tonight.
So that's why I know that it's okay for me to hate that.
Yes.
That because I wouldn't say what I would say about Kamala Harris is lay off the martinis, and Democrats, please find someone who can who can speak extemporaneously to start with, but could also articulate the position of the left, which I see as being that there is inequality in the world, that we should combat inequality if we can, and we should try and give people the best opportunity in life. So the left really should embody the values that I believe in, which are like, maximizing the equality of opportunity. But they now don't do that. They do something so different that I just go, that is evil. I hit the Islam problem.
Yeah. Which
is like, it doesn't say, it says in Islam, you've got to, unless these people are, all of the taxes, everything that they did to Christians and people of other religions.
convert, pay a tax, or die.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And that's true whether you're a moderate Muslim or an extremist Muslim.
That's right.
And that to me is absolutely wrong. But then I look at my own tyrannical government and it goes convert to wokery, pay tax, or socially die.
I like that. That's well said. That's very accurate.
It's the same ideology.
Yeah, it's very true.
It's not any different from
and economically die.
And I
Just
wonder why
socially,
that.
economically.
I wonder why. I've always wondered why there's been a really interesting sort of hand-in-hand relationship between Islam and wokery, and it's because they operate under exactly the same thing.
But they also have the same enemy. They hate Christians. They hate authentic.
Everyone hates Christians.
That's right. And they hate authentic Christianity. Woke Christianity, they know is no Christianity at all.
It's a warning
they hate
to
authentic Christianity.
It's a warning to
Ranger,
America.
don't hit that camera.
It's a warning to America, by the way, that that you guys don't have this problem yet, but we are going to see in the UK, we are going to see the UK by 2066, 2065 is the estimation that the UK becomes a predominantly Islamic country.
Yeah. Well, there's something. What fascinates me as it relates to this is the left, and I don't really want to go in this direction very far, but the left really believes they can ride this tiger. They think they can let tens of millions of Muslims and various others into Western countries, but somehow they're still going to maintain power. It will not work out that way. That's not going to happen. You know what just popped into my head about the atomic bomb that will interest you and kind of relates to this conversation? Many moons ago, I was doing research at the Naval War College, and I was reading a recently declassified thesis. You see, American captains, when not in war, they might go to the Naval War College to get a master's, degree, and so they study tactics and whatnot. And this particular this particular captain, who became an admiral, he had written 2 theses, and both of which is unusual. They typically would only write one, but both of them were classified for good reason because they don't want any potential enemies to know your thinking. But he had written both of them in 1946. So again, on the heels of World War II and the dropping of the atomic bombs, the first one that he wrote was spot on. He said the future of naval warfare is in nuclear submarines. And the first nuclear submarine went to sea in 1954. It's called the Nautilus. Admiral Rickover was kind of the genius behind that. But so he was spot on with predicting. I mean, that's where we are, the silent service, as it's called. His second thesis was that atomic bombs would be used in limited warfare. And he said that in future, instead of taking an Okinawa or Iwo Jima, we will use smaller tactical nukes for these things. And I only mention that because it does show that a generation that was faced with such extraordinary evil, the fascism of both Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany, and then the Cold War of the communists, they saw the line between good and evil much more clearly than we do, and they had no problem about the use of force in defense of certain principles that they deemed to be worth fighting for, and indeed worth dying for. We're now at a place where we can't quite figure that out. And the aforementioned MRD Foote, very famous. He wrote these. The only man to have been mentioned by his real name in a John Miller Correa novel. He was a spy in World War II. Very interesting guy, Michael Foote. And I'm very honored, by the way, for him to have had such an impact on my own life. But Michael Foote said this. He said that when he was at Oxford in the 1930s, and see if this doesn't resonate with where we are. He said when he was at Oxford in the 1930s that he was a pacifist. He said, I was an atheist, a pacifist, and a communist. He had a tragic love affair with Iris Murdoch, the famous, Irish, poet and writer and Oxford Don with her. And he said when Churchill came to speak on our campus, he was still in his wilderness years, and he said we were the Oxford elite. We were all sure that we were smarter than he was, and that Churchill. I actually think this story is recorded in a biography by William Manchester, The Last Lion. But anyway, Michael Foote said that we went to hear him speak when he was coming.
Not that Michael Foote, by the way, just so we're
yeah, not the parliamentarian. Yeah. This is a different. I think he's MDR Foote, actually, something like that. But anyway, Michael Richard Daniel Foote, the Oxford historian, not parliamentarian. When Churchill came to speak on that campus, Churchill's wilderness years, we were all pacifistic because we were high and mighty and very moral, and we were sure we were a lot smarter than this guy who was a has-been and had failed his entrance exam to Sandhurst, I think, 2 or 3 times. And he was telling us that a war with Germany was coming, and no one at this point believed it. And he said, so we just sat there giggling and mocking him, and he said that Churchill said, you won't be laughing when in 10 years, half of you are dead.
What does one do in the information age to help people understand? So the other thing I'm fascinated about is Japan post-war. So Japan became very, Japan is, I'd never grown up thinking Japan was a threat to anybody.
Yeah, no, of course not.
So what effect was the atomic bomb on that, and what effect was but Japan became, interestingly, out of all of the countries that I know in the world,
most democratic.
Yeah, and they don't like illegal immigration to Japan.
Don't allow it.
They don't allow it.
Don't allow
it. So something happened, and do you think that was a result of what happened in the Second World War, the aftermath of the Second World War?
Absolutely, because you know who wrote Japan's constitution? Little trivia question for you.
Who?
No, but you're close. MacArthur. MacArthur and his staff.
Is this the same MacArthur who did McCarthyism?
No. This is General Douglas MacArthur.
Oh, sorry, got you.
Not McCarthy.
See how smart I am?
You're it's American history. We aren't expecting you to be so terribly knowledgeable in our own history, and yet you're still probably much more knowledgeable than the average American when it comes to this. But no, you're talking about McCarthyism, which is is different. But no, Douglas MacArthur is a fascinating figure in American history. He was in fact one of the most astonishing figures and brilliant. He scored the highest entrance exam at West Point and stood for decades, and he was a 2-time recipient of the Congressional Medal of Honor. His own father was a recipient of the Congressional Medal of Honor, which is pretty incredible. Fought in the Battle of Chattanooga, where he received his during the Civil War. His father received his Medal of Honor,
which is now a smart city.
Which is now apparently a smart city. But anyway, I think what changed Japan was, first of all, the destruction of the emperor's image as a god. The photograph of the emperor standing next to MacArthur, which is iconic, many people say did more to free Japan from emperor worship than anything, because MacArthur was a very big man. He was a tall man. I'm not sure how tall he was, but we'll say 6'3" maybe. And the emperor was a very diminutive figure. And the people didn't see the emperor. They didn't have any. And here he is. He left the palace to go to meet with MacArthur, and he's standing next to him, and he's like this.
5'5".
And people, it's that image that destroyed the idea that he was a god. And add to that the Japanese Constitution was so democratic, and MacArthur had the view that Congress wanted MacArthur to suppress the Communist Party, suppress fascists. He said, "I won't do it." He says, "I won't do it. You will make them grow if you do that. They will wither on the vine when the people are given a choice and they're properly educated." And Japan went from being a backward, feudalistic, emperor-worshiping culture where women were property to becoming the modern juggernaut. Have you ever been in Japan?
No.
I have. Japan is an extraordinary country. I mean, as I say in my book, Around the World in More Than 80 Days, Japan is good for the Japanese. And what I mean by that is that the Japanese don't care whether it's good for you to visit or assimilate. They've made their country good for them. They like their country. Japanese is the official language. They're not ashamed of their culture. But they have discarded those elements that they recognized were quite backwards for the most part. And they were deeply, deeply influenced by a Western ethic. And there are parts of the world where the United States in particular, but Britain as well before us, have tried to graft, as it were, their culture onto another culture. And there are those places where it worked and those places that it didn't work. Japan has been, and Victor Davis Hanson has pointed this out, that the graft took there beautifully, incredibly, so that Japan is what it is today. And Japan became this is starting to change in Japan. Japan became a very pacifistic country, but they're now wondering, are we strong enough to protect them? Will we protect them? When you had Rocket Man, as Trump calls him. I was in Japan when North Korea was lobbing missiles. You hear the sirens going off, and those missiles are going over Japan, and the saber rattling from China. They're beginning to wonder, are we strong enough? Are we willing? Do we have the moral will to defend?
Well, they're also suffering even worse than anywhere else on Earth, I think, from the IFR, from the replacement rate, birth rate. So Japan is a nation of old people. So I wonder what I mean, I don't know enough about it. It'd be interesting.
Let me ask you a question. Where do you think, let's just put this at a practical level. So we've talked about it historically, whether or not dropping the atomic bombs was justified. I believe 100% that that it was justified in dropping them. And I think every credible historian would take that view. I'd also recommend, if you're interested in the question, I just read a book, didn't even know we were going to have this conversation. I just read the book by Evan Thomas, I believe is his name, or is it Thomas Evans? Anyway, it's going straight out of my head. I should look it up. But the book is called The Road to Surrender. And it's about what was really going on the Japanese side as the war was coming to a close, and the discussions that were being held in the circles of power up to the dropping of the first bomb and the dropping of the second bomb, and then even then the delay before surrender. It's a fascinating book. It's very well written, and maybe I can look this up before this episode is over to clarify the name of the author. But for you, so we've talked about that historically. Where do you draw a line in? I mean, we're talking about, you were just talking about the efforts to really indoctrinate your children. And let's say they want to trans one of your children. I mean, what place do we say enough is enough? Because I have thought that the American people, I can't speak for the British people, but I think the American people have been extraordinarily tolerant. I mean, the American Revolution was fought over what now would seem like really trivial stuff. I mean, taxation without representation. That bunch would have gone to war with Democrats years ago. But the American people see. So where do you draw the line?
I think it's really simple, which is that, the old adage of speak softly with a big stick is the only way you can manage those that are hell-bent on destroying the world, and deterrence is the most important tool that we have to do that. And therefore, if you're going to provide deterrence, and the deterrence is, if you do that, we're going to drop a nuclear bomb on you, then I think that is much more powerful than warmongering. But
we're talking about people in your own country.
Yeah, no.
You can't
Trump calls it the enemy within, and absolutely we have the enemy within. We have the National Health Service, which I think should be shut down and closed and replaced with a National Emergency Service.
The Department of Education, the IRS.
Well, it should just be transparent. We should have open school boards. We should, the stuff that they teach is beyond, and we're just making more and more activists. And as we've worked out from this conversation, it's young people that are most ideologically solid, even though that their understanding is much less than someone who's been kicked and punched a bit in life. It's going to, unless we do take control, unless people provide deterrence, and they turn around and they say, if you teach children this, unless a Conservative government comes in to the UK, which it will get elected next time, and it doesn't say, if you start teaching children this stuff, we will close your school. And every single teacher will be out of a job, and you will never work in education again. I promise you that. Until that starts happening, it just gets worse and worse and worse. Because I think partly this way the atomic bomb conversation sort of happened is it's been so long since anyone has seen someone else suffer.
Yeah.
In our world. We talk in Gaza, all of these people, these, sort of bleeding heart people, and one's heart does bleed for innocent children who were put next to snipers or gun emplacements or missile batteries. They didn't deserve to die. And also they were indoctrinated with their own death cultist ideology. So it's not fair. But until people turn around and start defending the values, or Calvin hates the word values, but I like the word values, maybe culture. And still people start turning around and going, that is a shitty culture.
Yeah.
That is the product of 70 years of shitty decisions. And all of the money we gave you, you used to build tunnels and fund terrorism. That's what you did with the money. You didn't use that money to educate your children and set them free so that they could become a little Silicon Valley on the Mediterranean. You didn't. Until we stop the moral relativism that is destroying the West, I think the whole place is screwed. And this is why I'm prayerful for a Trump victory, because he said he was leaning out the window at McDonald's and he said, you see these people?
This is great,
he said, you see these people? They want hope. They need hope.
I was waiting for him to say, I'm loving it.
Donald McDonald.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's this sort of...
Trolling Kamala, I'm loving it.
I think that people are...
He's great at trolling people.
Well, yeah, but I'm not sure that's the most effective. It's very good for the internet age, and does he provide clicks. But we're going to enter an age where the internet is the only thing. The BBC today said, should we stop calling people ethnic minorities? Should we start calling them global majorities? And it's like, you're like the state propagandist service.
Yeah.
You stop talking like this. And on the plus side, as I said, I think in a tweet, I haven't met anyone under 20 really who has ever even heard of the BBC or ever even downloaded something on iPlayer, which is a real shame, because you would have thought the qualities of the left would be to create an environment where kids from different backgrounds, not just the privileged kids, could get an opportunity to work at the top institution in the land. But instead what they do is they just use it to put a bunch of middle-class woke leftists into positions of authority to hector and badger people with with different views of them. And I think it's just getting like this, going to go like that. So that's why I wanted to find out about the cannibalism thing and where we're going to end up heading into the last, 2 and a bit weeks now. And I just can't see these 2 and a bit weeks going without something happening.
Well, no, I can't either. I mean, I think something's going to happen. As we close this episode of WTF, let's have a brief conversation. Let's start where we began, and that was that you said that it was your last day. This is your last day here. Let's hear the British perspective on not just America, but the American South. This is your second time here. We've had a lot of fun. We sit on the porch. We go for boat rides. We introduce you to football. In some sense, a vacation isn't always the best predictor, but in a lot of ways, you're actually been sort of incorporated into our family, into real family life drama and issues. You've been here for it all. So anyway, what's your perspective of all of this?
I think the huge amount of value that is placed on courtesy, and also the colorblindness. Weirdly, you as a British person, you're taught the American South is just a bunch of white guys running around in hoods trying to kill everyone. but that's what we're taught.
Yeah, I know.
And that's kind of what you think. But I maybe in the big cities, when we went to Nashville and when you drive past Birmingham, you see the Palestine flags and the LGBTQ flags. But much for muchness, the places we stop and the places we see and the people we see, there's a lot of poverty, which is sad because poverty is always sad. But you see people of all different. You see black and white people treat each other it's not an issue.
Yeah.
It's just not an issue that I can see. I'm sure it is an issue in places, so I'm not saying I have any great experience of that. But the emphasis placed on courtesy and good manners, which in England would be seen as a far right quality, timeliness, good manners, all that sort of thing, that I've really noticed. I've really noticed that the huge pride in being an American, the pride that people take in it.
Across socioeconomic groups.
Yeah. And the politeness, like the guy when we went into the Dollar General, and this guy, he's a young guy, it's a Sunday, he's got a wispy moustache, he's trying his hardest to grow it, and he's just the most polite.
Yeah, very nice. Wanted to be helpful, and the woman who was the manager went out to feed Ranger.
Yeah, and
she saw him in the Land Rover. She wanted to go out there and feed him, so she did.
You get it in more rural parts of England, but the English are famously a bit more grumpy than most other people. But there is you have an exact sense of where you are. And I think that if you know where you are, then you know...
And who you are.
You know how you're going to communicate with someone and what the acceptable, non-acceptable things are. And I think this is the most important thing because, if you go to Gaza, it's acceptable to say, look, we're going to need 2 of your kids because we've got a guy who wants to do an RPG into an Israeli tank and, we're all in this together, guys.
Yeah.
And I don't want that shitty culture in my country.
Yeah,
and I want to preserve the things in my country, and in this country is an exemplar of it, which is I want to preserve that somewhereness. This somewhere is America, and then let the left talk about and have Indigenous Peoples Day, but it's not like. I find it so frustrating. All of this, we all stole the land off the Indians. It's not like the difference saying, we're going to go and have lunch with the Choctaw this afternoon and just have a little powwow and a chin wag and give each other a hug and maybe have some turkey. People have been killing each other over land and territory for years. So what do you want in a nation is you want a nation which knows what it is, knows where it's going and wants to create peace and prosperity around the world. That's what you want. And I think that's what Trump wants, actually, whether you like him or not. And I think Harris wants division and these people, what makes these people in these, we drive past these places on a motorway, you can buy these houses from the side of the road.
Yeah.
What makes them any different from some inner city black kid?
Yeah.
What makes it any different?
Yeah.
They live in proper penury. But for somehow, because they're white kids, it doesn't matter. And I don't want to live in a world where one kind of poverty is more is more.
White poverty is not discussed.
No.
And white poverty, as you've seen, is real.
Yeah.
It's very real. And if we were to go to Appalachia or something, we would really, really see serious white poverty. There's no discussion of that because the assumption is that, yes, exactly. The assumption is that white people were all racist and rich and live like Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden. And I mean, the people who are genuinely racist and are genuinely white trash. But no, white poverty isn't actually discussed, and the Democrat Party doesn't care for them at all. A couple of nights ago, we were out for dinner at a local place, and my back was hurting, so I got up to stretch, and I saw a man and his son.
He can't ride a bike properly, so he decided to ride it into a car and break all of his spine.
Guy ran a red light, just to be clear. But I see this guy sitting with his son, and he's been golfing. His son has been golfing with. His son looked like he was about 10. And I was thinking about what I was going to eat, and they were eating a pepperoni pizza. So I went over and said, "Hey, is the pizza good?" And I start chatting with the two of these guys. Turns out this fellow was somewhat familiar with my own work. And anyway, I just visited with him briefly, and then I came and sat back down. So when it came time for us to leave, I asked the waitress for the check, and she said that man picked it up on his way out. And that's for the whole table. That was for all of us. My mom was with us, my wife Lori, Laurence, his fiancee Lizzie. This guy had just a random guy just said, "I'll pick up their check," and did. That's not incredibly unique in the American South.
It's not incredibly unique in England, to be fair.
It's
I get
you get that occasionally.
I've had the
fantastic,
most generous people.
Fantastic,
because people know what they want to be, and they don't want to be living in a because it's fake as well. Especially the racism stuff is absolutely in Britain hugely fake. Yes, you're going to find racists everywhere. There is no perfect utopian society, but everything, all metrics lead towards the fact that we're genuinely progressive society. So people are really grateful when you say this stuff out
when you're
loud.
the guy who. So it's not just that the left via the media has encouraged people to vomit out hate on you, but there's also been the opposite. Some people who see you and go, "I want to buy that guy a drink. I want to pick up his dinner." So you've experienced some of that.
Yeah, I get it all the time. But
fantastic.
It's as you said. I think last time. The genius of the left is that the only thing you can convince someone truly to change their mind over is whether they're a victim or not. And I think people are sick to death. And there's a pride here that you don't have in England in the cities. The only pride you get in the cities in England is a vomiting rainbow flag.
Yeah, of course.
Full of Black Lives Matter. And that's not pride.
No one should be proud of that.
And they say,
you shouldn't be proud about being penetrated in your anus. I mean, I'm just stating very clearly.
Unless it's by a finger with Vaseline after a ghost pepper jerky session. And on that bombshell...
Do they know what we're talking about when we talk about the ghost pepper? Because I think we should explain that.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to tell that story?
I'll tell the story, Larry. Thanks a lot. Let's immortalize
It's a story
this.
about his anus. So be prepared.
Once upon a time, a suave Southern American gentleman called Larry Alex Taunton said, "Let's go to Nashville so you can listen to some music. And on the way, we'll stop at Buc-ee's." Buc-ee's is great, by the way. Highly recommend it. And we stop at Buc-ee's, and there's a wall of jerky. And anyone who knows me knows that I'm a very low-carb person, and I'm a very high-protein person. So I thought, I'm going to help myself. I'm going to buy a few bags of this jerky. And I stopped at the ghost pepper section.
Only he would look at ghost pepper jerky and go, "Yeah, I should get some of that."
So I bought, well, you ate some of it. So I buy the ghost pepper jerky, and I have this memory in my mind. I flash back to this time when I had a very, 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 very hot jerk chicken. And I had it more than once because it was so good, but it was so painful on my stomach. Anyway, I got in the car with the ghost pepper jerky, and we got another couple of hours to Nashville, and I go, I'm going to have some of this. And then I think I said it out loud. I said, I'm going to regret this.
Well, yes, but to clarify, he gave me a piece of it. I took one bite, and I put the rest of it on the dash. I said, I'm done with this. But you continued.
I continued.
After knowing what it was going to do to your digestive tract, you said, "No, this is a good idea.
Well, I
think I'm going to keep doing this."
I thought I might have got away with it this time. So anyway, I started eating it. We then turn up at the most lovely couple in Franklin, Tennessee, which, by the way, is just beautiful. And
Dan and Judy, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan and Judy.
Thank you for tolerating him using your bathroom
and for having air freshener in those bathrooms. So we then turn up, and the most beautiful. They're very informal people, but it's quite a formal setting. The beautiful house and all this sort of stuff. Everything's very, very clean, crisp, and tidy, and beautiful meal prepared.
Great,
so nice.
Great
and
chicken parmesan and cheesecake.
Halfway through lunch, I start going, oh. And anyway, to cut a long story short, I didn't leave a bathroom for pretty much the remainder of the day. And I think I tweeted that anyone who smuggles in ghost pepper jerky a national security emergency should be declared. So now, for anyone who's worried about me, my stomach is coming back to normal, but I have visited more restrooms in the state of Tennessee than most English people ever, I would say.
I had told this lovely couple we were going to visit that is it detective sergeant or sergeant detective?
I think I became a detective inspector by the end.
Okay. I said that Detective Inspector Hathaway from Lewis, the ITV show Lewis, is coming. And what did he do? He went and he...
I came, I shat, I conquered.
He came and used their bathroom like a blasting site. And, you could hear the rumblings. We're out there trying to have polite conversations, and then occasionally you go, there was a car backfiring on the street. I'm sure that was somebody is lighting fireworks. This fireworks that's going on out here. That's they're doing drilling next door. But this was the noise that was going on, and the moaning and groaning, all this stuff that was going on. It was absolutely incredible. And then we left their place and had to stop multiple times before we got to the hotel. You couldn't go anywhere that night or the next day. It was just constantly the guy was on the can. And all because he said, you know what? Ghost pepper, this is a good idea.
Really, really love you, Larry. God, it's such a pleasure to be with you.
So we will end this episode
on that delightful image.
WTF on the story of Uranus. Thank you so much for joining us on my porch.
On one of your porches.
On one of my many porches.
Yeah. God bless.